powerful and abusive men, from entertainment mogul Harvey Weinstein to New York Attorney General Eric Schneider, all minutes while putting the finishing touches on an essential new book, War on Peace, the End of Diplomacy and the Decline of American Influence. As the United States lives its American First moment, Farrow chronicles the nation's unilateral retreat from the indispensable field of diplomacy and global leadership, managing to get every living former Secretary of State on the record, including an extraordinarily candid exit interview with a pre-defenestrated Rex Tillerson. On a 24/7 book tour now, Farrow dropped into our studio here in London to talk to me about how America's new direction is playing out around the world, from Iran to North Korea, from climate change to trade tariffs, and about his personal insight into sexual abuse as the son of Woody Allen and Mia Farrow. Ronan Farrow, welcome to the program.
It's a pleasure to be here, Christian.
So let's first talk about your amazing productivity. I mean, literally every time we turn around, there's another Ronan Farrow scoop, there's a Ronan Farrow book, and it's literally the world of Ronan Farrow. How on earth do you manage it with such disparate subjects, the whole Me Too revelations, this, which is all about America's role in the world and diplomacy, very different subjects?
You know, I've been really fortunate to have leads come my way and brave sources turn whistleblower, as they did in this book, War on Peace, and as all these brave women did and present hard truths that I really have had no choice but to work the clock to bear it out.
You've got the Pulitzer, you've got the Pope, you've got all of the reports coming your way. Does it feel like a victory? Does it feel like vindication for you?
It feels like a relief, Christian. You know, there were so many obstacles arrayed against some of these stories, particularly the Harvey Weinstein story, which, you know, we easily forget came at a very different time in our history. Already, you know, there's been all this analysis and all these brave people coming forward, but as I was reporting on this, I was very, very fearful that this story was going to be fully shut down and these women would never be heard, so I'm relieved.
I mean, you were essentially, you didn't know whether you'd ever get this Me Too story out. The network that you were working for spiked it. The press had a role itself in suppressing some of the stories for a long, long time.
Actually, yeah, you know, the questions about the role of media over the years of silence around the Harvey Weinstein story are absolutely correct. And one of the ways in which I conducted this reporting is to focus on the systems that it exposes, the way in which law enforcement became an avatar for the interests of power and men, and this revolving door between the DA's office in New York and high-priced private investigation firms that do the work of influencing the DA's office. You know, media entities became a force for suppression. And, you know, there were...
How do you think the media entities, I mean, our DNA is to be investigative. What was it about the media that wanted you not to tell these stories?
Well, you know, I have to be careful about what I say at this point. I think there'll be more to come later, and I've been very focused on the underlying allegations, because I don't want to distract from what these women did and said. But you're absolutely right to suggest that, you know, what happened here is contrary to the spirit of investigating the truth, and that's a real problem.
Well, we are going to come back to that, but let me get to your book first, because this is War on Peace, a very aptly titled book, and your subtitle is The End of Diplomacy and the Decline of American Influence, and that is a huge topic right now with the presidency of Donald Trump. What do you think, for instance, the result of putting out the Iran deal will be for American influence?
A significant tract of War on Peace is devoted to the inside story of how the Iran deal was brokered, and the sweat and blood and tears and literal broken bones in some cases that went into that deal, but also the acknowledgement. Wendy Sherman, a senior career diplomat, broke a finger and a nose somehow, you know, slamming into doors, falling downstairs, rushing from one negotiation to another, and John Kerry broke a femur. You know,
he was hobbling around in a plaster
during the negotiations, right, as you know from covering them. This was a high-stakes gambit, and all of those architects of the Iran deal are the first to acknowledge it is incomplete, it is imperfect, by design. Because the feeling was, yes, Iran is a rogue state in any number of other ways. The non-nuclear missile tests, the kidnappings, the human rights abuses. But you are better positioned to address all those issues if you also have a signal that they are on the verge of becoming a major nuclear power. And in that narrow respect, John, as you know, all of the world powers right around this and behind this deal agreed that Iran was compliant and it was at least temporarily working. So there is great concern from the experts whose stories are in this book that the withdrawal from this deal will drive a wedge between the United States and all those other allies, and also send this incredibly troubling message to North Korea at a time when we so desperately want them to come to the table and stick to the commitments they made.
So let's unpick that a little bit. In terms of the deal, it wasn't perfect, but it was a good deal, and in the aftermath of President Trump's withdrawal, in fact, technically violating the IAEA has again come out and said that Iran is 100% supporting it.
And what that means is that the United States is, as you say, violating the terms of the deal, unilaterally sabotaging it. That is how it will be seen. That plays into Iran's hands. And, you know, this is not a universe in which we have withdrawn from the Iran deal to go to some mythical better deal. The president talks about this idea that there's a perfect deal out there. We don't have that on the table. And some of the best diplomatic minds we have went to work trying to get the best deal we could at that moment in history, at a point of war that had already sabotaged earlier opportunities, and there were too many centrifuges going to get a perfect deal. This was the best we had, and now we've left it for no alternative.
You talk about whistleblowers in the State Department who are brave enough to talk to you. You know, I mean, the one thing the world has got to know about America, certainly from the very beginning, when you had, I know, Benjamin Franklin, who was a great American diplomat, George Kennan, decades later. That seems to be going by the wayside in this administration particularly, but was it already a trend that was happening? Fewer people signing up for the Foreign Service, cutting of the State Department, fewer experts able to apply their important training.
Everything you just described is absolutely happening. It's very fast and extreme right now. There is a purge of the State Department. Offices devoted to crafting policy in some of the most dangerous and important places on Earth for are empty, are being run by lower-level acting officials. Embassies around the world are empty. There are precedents in our past, though. The Clinton administration slashed and burned diplomacy in a very significant way. We shuttered a lot of embassies, we surrendered a lot of influence, and we ended up actually shuttering 2 government agencies devoted to information control. Priorities we could use more experts on right now. And therefore, you know, went into the post-9/11 world already badly handicapped in this respect. We have not learned the lesson of the past. Indeed, we're doubling down on those mistakes.
To the idea that the President of the United States has a right to try to seek a better deal, and that he campaigned on ripping up this deal, so to speak, how credible is it to you that a presidential campaign is run on Americans thinking he's going to do something about the Iran deal? I mean, is that even credible?
You know, Donald Trump, like many politicians before him, invoked a strain of nationalism that's often set against the work of diplomats and the work of foreign policy. And that is profoundly damaging and also unfair and abusive towards public servants who are brave men and women doing life-saving work. There is this stereotype of the dusty bureaucrat who doesn't get anything done, and this book prominently describes the problems that need reforming at the State Department. It doesn't give a rosy picture, but it also highlights the way in which that's a misunderstanding, the way in which, in fact, these are not dusty bureaucrats. These are men and women at the front lines in all of our conflicts around the world, screening dangerous people trying to get into the United States, saving the Americans who are kidnapped or otherwise abused, crafting the high-level deals that hopefully keep our brave servicemen and women out of the line.
Secretary of State Clinton was the last of the great slashers and burners. Is that something that the State Department believes, or you believe, will continue under Mike Pompeo's recent visit, or is he going to try to rebuild his private bureaucracy?
Rex Tillerson is on the record, like all of the former secretaries of state, in War on Peace, and he's really as candid as he's ever been before. He says for the first time that he may have just been too inexperienced for this job, and that he didn't know how to do budget advocacy. He lays a lot of blame at the feet of the White House. It's a pretty extraordinary set of confessions from him. Look, Mike Pompeo is less likely to be out of his depth in precisely the same way because he is a politician in a Washington office. From, you know, the first rounds of back and forth in his confirmation hearing that he knows how to say the right thing. That said, there's a lot of excitement about the opening salvo statements from Rex Tillerson too. And while the rhetoric sounds good now, we have to wait and see if Mike Pompeo will pull out of his wayside as so many career officials hopefully will.
So, you mentioned so many vital areas being directed or service personnel. I mean, North Korea is one of them, North and South Korea. Mike Pompeo has come back to the United States with the 3 detained Korean Americans in North Korea. That obviously is a goodwill gesture on the brink of a summit between the two leaders. Where do you think this could lead, based on all that you've learned from the State Department and in the wake of President Trump pulling out of the Iran deal?
It's both confirms in vague terms the prospect of this leader-to-leader meeting on the North Korean issue. There are very legitimate reasons why we have said no, especially to that kind of meeting before. You really run the risk of legitimizing North Korea as a nuclear power. History shows that a lot of this history of negotiations around North Korea is laid out more on the side. This is Korea diplomatic. They lie. They speak out of both sides of their mouths. They don't live up to commitments. And the problem, Christian, is not that to run this as a diplomacy by tweet operation and to saber rattle and to go in there and have the meeting. But all of the experts agree you need a core of individuals steeped in the history, knowledgeable about the pressure points and the pitfalls to steer those kinds of conversations, and that is just not happening right now.
The Iran deal obviously was down to a hard negotiation between John Kerry and Javad Zarif, his Iranian counterpart. And Kerry basically said, when the deal was signed, he used the occasion to reflect on his service in Vietnam, you write, saying, I learned in war the price that is paid when diplomacy fails. And that is essentially the guts of your book, that the military-industrial surveillance complex takes over when diplomacy is on the back foot.
And nobody in this book is arguing that the soldiers and spies doing important work to advance American interests aren't needed. But there needs to be a balance. And Madeleine Albright, Brooke saying in really incendiary terms, the balance is out of whack. Especially in the years since 9/11, there has been less and less space for veterans in the room. And, the consequences of that are exactly as John Kerry says, we give up opportunities to end an avert war.
Do you think that if this deal dies and the Europeans somehow can't manage to save it along with Iran because of US pressure, that we are back to what President Obama said, either a nuclear-armed Iran or a much higher likelihood of another war in the Middle East?
There is an extraordinarily high risk of that. The Obama administration, and this isn't just partisans. These are top military officials who have, in some cases, survived multiple administrations from both parties and look at the options on the ground. And tactically, what they concluded was the ability to strike Iran to reduce their nuclear capacity was woefully limited. They can do things underground. They can rebuild. Once they have the technical know-how, they can always, in a few months, get back to where they were. And you're at the very real risk of a perpetual cycle of strikes. This is a very dangerous footing that we put ourselves on.
And of course, part of the big issue right now is Syria and America's role there. And the Obama administration sadly will be remembered for having failed in Syria. And you use Syria as part of your case study.
Syria was one of the many examples of the chaos of not having a concerted, unified diplomatic team with empowered diplomats at the helm. On the ground for some time, as the Obama White House vacillated and followed the red lines and didn't react to the cost of red lines, as done extraordinary reporting on Christian. What was happening in the background was the Pentagon and the CIA were running amok and arming and supporting factions on the ground that often were at each other's throats. It was complete chaos, and I told the story of members of those various factions going to American command centers on the ground and talking to an American official who would say, oh no, I'm with the CIA, not the Pentagon, you gotta talk to the other guys. And these are factions fighting each other. It's the chaos that results in the absence of diplomacy.
So let's get back to your own story. Because no one can avoid the fact that Ronan Farrow is also embroiled in one of the big Me Too stories of the last couple of decades. How much of your experience, your writings about your own father, Woody Allen, have informed your zeal on this issue?
Only in a very attenuated way, Christian, and I want to be careful to point that out because This idea that there was some kind of a deeply rooted personal vendetta was, an attempted weaponization of that happened by Harvey Weinstein, and there's just no truth to it, and any journalist that looked at it immediately saw. I was an ambitious reporter on a huge lead, and I was dogged as a result. I had only lovely feelings about Harvey Weinstein going into this.
Really?
You and I were at many events that he was at together, and just light interactions, nothing but. Members of my family had worked with him in a totally productive and
So
positive
was
way.
it then risky for you? I mean, your mother's an actress, again, your father's a director, as you say, members of your family. Was it risky for you to take on Harvey Weinstein?
It turned out to be profoundly risky, really, for a time, my television career ended when I refused to stop reporting this story. He made devastating personal threats. I had some unsavory characters following me and staking me out, and none of that is at all commensurate with the tremendous trauma that these women, these sources, went through. But it was a set of obstacles.
What sort of threats?
I want to be careful to not become the story, and again, that falls into the category of I think that there will be time to look behind the scenes. It was not an easy process, and the personal links to it that kept me driven were simply that I had experienced what happens to a family when this devastating issue of sexual violence hits it. It was an emotional understanding of the broad strokes of how important it was to tell these stories. Not a personal feeling about Harvey Weinstein.
Indeed, and I'm not even suggesting a personal vendetta, I'm suggesting what might motivate and inform a human being when you're taking on an issue. But particularly, I think you even said to your assistant, Dylan, really, do you have to keep writing about this stuff?
I think I had an acute understanding of the conversation we all went through nationally in the United States, of initially grappling with, why is this worth it? And then over time, reviewing how incredibly well corroborated my sister's story was, and hearing her anguish, understanding that as painful as it was to dredge that up, her determination to have those allegations see the light of day was actually a brave and important thing. And certainly that informed my conversations, at some time later with accusers of powerful men that I was reporting on.
And then you came out and defended her.
So I had to go through a complicated process after my sister insisted on speaking out, and really review the evidence carefully, and then conclude, almost grudgingly at first, that this was so serious and so credible that I had an obligation to respond to these questions that I was then besieged with, and say, yes, actually, my judgment as a brother, but also as a reporter and an attorney who's reviewed the evidence, is this is really serious and she should be heard. And I did that only one time in a Hollywood Reporter column that they asked me to write, and I said yes because I felt that sense of moral obligation. And since then, she has been more than equipped to raise a very loud voice herself.
And you did that, but that also, I think you're right, it sort of empowered or encouraged the women who you then were able to break their story to come to you, because they knew that you would be open to their story.
Well, I was quite badly attacked and smeared for writing that, and it wasn't particularly convenient for my career, but I have no regrets about it. I'm very proud to have been able to support my sister as she did a brave thing, and I do think that for some of the accusers of Harvey Weinstein who did this incredibly courageous act, speaking out about this, and did it at so much personal risk, it was probably a helpful precedent that they knew I had spoken in a forthright way about this issue when so many others refused to.
Just this week, as you're promoting this book, you also had another big scoop about the Attorney General of New York. He obviously denies these allegations, but you had women come up and tell you about issues of domestic abuse and violence. Tell me about that one.
These are terrifically serious allegations of violence being raised about Eric Schneider, the Attorney General of New York, now former Attorney General. This is the complication of this story. Woman after woman describing beatings, essentially, slapping, choking, punching, and his response, Christian, has been to say this was consensual role-playing. And indeed, it appears in his sexual activities by the accounts of these women that there was a proclivity for that kind of violence. But they went to say this was not role-playing that they are raising the allegations about, and that they wouldn't have raised the allegations because simply that this was a set of physical facts that transpired when they were clothed off in one case with a woman who was simply a colleague of his professional architect who became money allegedly, and when she rebuffed him, he began hurling terrible misogynistic epithets and slapped her in the face multiple times, hard to mark. And I looked at that photo of that mark and heard all of these stories and looked at medical records, and my colleague Jane Mayer and I really worked hard to make sure we knew that this was dead to rights. And all I can say is these are both serious and very, very important claims.
And I wonder what you make of the latest verdict result in the latest Bill Cosby case. And remembering that books have been written about him that never even broached the subject of the sexual abuse that many of his women alleged against him. And this was years ago. You go into that as well. Again, it's part of, I think, what you described as the conspiracy of silence around powerful actors, and players, not just theatrical actors.
I remember just a few years ago being on air and interviewing Cosby's file members and having fights in the newsroom about what to ask about the absence of these allegations in what was supposed to be the definitive biography of Cosby, which obviously has not aged that well. And there was a lot of pushback. There were a lot of veteran journalists and television producers who just said this is salacious, edited. Now, ask one final question about it as a first interview. That really illustrated just how